Hi, this is David Ware with the Arkansas State Archives, talking to you today about a sometimes overlooked but valuable government document, examples of which we have in the Archives collection. What do we call these things? Digests. Now, what is a digest? A digest is an encapsulation of the law as it existed at a particular period of time. It is the law of a state, the various laws of the state, put together in compact form, usually without a whole lot of citations, not many footnotes, but it provides a slice of life, if you will. It gives us an index of exactly what was the law at a particular place and time in our state's past. The first digests were compiled before the Civil War. I have an example here of one published in 1838, which obviously somebody has used to practice his penmanship. And then on the overleaf, we have the revised statutes. Obviously the ink kind of soaked through, and then a family member thoughtfully put in their names too. Some people use family Bibles. These folks used the revised statutes of Arkansas for 1838. A few weeks ago, a question came into the archives, called in by a gentleman who asked, what were the Jim Crow laws of Arkansas? Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the term, Jim Crow refers to a body of law and practice that emerged in 19th century America, persisted well into the 20th century, based on the idea of the segregation, legal as well as habitual, of the races. The Jim Crow laws in Arkansas are believed to have started with the Separate Coaches Act of 1891, that is, providing separate accommodations for white and other passengers in railroad cars and streetcars and so forth. My patron wanted to know, what were Arkansas's Jim Crow laws? Easiest way to find this out is to go to a digest. And so I steered him towards the digest of 1921, which would represent, I thought, probably the best assortment of these racially segregating laws enacted in Arkansas in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This is the digest in question, the Crawford and Moses Digest of 1921. But if you go into the index, and if you're a little bit inventive with your terms, you can find some amazing things. For instance, how many citations do we have for Negro? Negro race, delivery of mulatto child, prima facie evidence of illegal cohabitation, person of, defined. Negroes, legalizes marriages of those cohabitating together. Negroes and whites, C. Color line. Marriages between are void. They are to be separated in schools, segregated on trains, segregated in streetcars, segregated in tax books, segregated in voting, in the penitentiary, in waiting rooms. Now let's see what we find else when we look at color line. Okay, color line, see white persons, Negroes. Marriage, education, taxation, transportation, accommodation in jails and penitentiaries, in voting, in waiting rooms, that is railroad stations and streetcar trolley stations and so forth. Color line to be observed in county convict system. Okay. There's no substitute when trying to recreate how life was at a particular time. There's no substitute for going back and looking at the original sources. Sources that are contemporary with what you're trying to write about or what you're trying to study. If you're trying to find out, let's say for instance, what people knew at the turn of the century, go back to an encyclopedia published around then. If you want to know the laws under which they did their daily lives, their daily business, you go to a digest like this. It's not always particularly inspiring reading. It's not terribly exciting reading. And if you go through the texts of these laws, you find out in just what detail Arkansas legislators figured out how to keep the races separated and one race subjugated. Now, this is not the whole story of Jim Crow. There are actually relatively few state-level enactments separating the races, but these basically empowered municipalities and counties to enact and carry out their own particular laws and rules of segregation. Jim Crow wasn't just a national thing, it wasn't just a state thing, it was a practice, it was a habit, it was a system that existed at every level of government and every level of society. And By going to the digest, it's possible to get at least an insight into one portion of what made up the system of Jim Crow. For the Arkansas State Archives, this is David Ware reminding you, here at the Archives, we've got 200 years of Arkansas history and more. It's all waiting for you to explore.